Hi, this message is for the legislators and, well, pretty much anyone else who's working on healthcare reform right now. My name's Kara, and this is George. I'm a type 1 diabetic, and George, well, he's just teething. He's actually perfectly fine. But I wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking with you about what it is like to have a pre-existing condition. So, like I said, I'm a type 1 diabetic, and most of the time I take care of my insulin needs via an insulin pump. Sorry, this cat keeps getting in my way. So I'm going to set this baby down for a second and show you what my insulin pump looks like. So this is the part of the insulin pump that is stuck inside my body. So there's like a tube in there, and the tube feeds the insulin into my body. Shenanigans, get out of the way. So the insulin is actually kept in here inside of this insulin pump, and I am so thankful that this technology exists, because now instead of taking, like 10 or 12 different insulin shots per day, I can actually push a couple of buttons on this insulin pump and take my insulin that way. Now, when you wear an insulin pump, you still have to poke yourself. So like every 2 to 3 days, I have to jab myself with a new needle that sits under my skin. George, let's leave mommy's computer alone. And so it's still less poking, I guess, than when you have to take shots. Taking shots isn't very fun. But in case you were wondering what it's like to take shots, like say, for example, if your insulin pump malfunctions, or if your insurance company doesn't cover an insulin pump, or if you just don't have insurance, or, $5,000 to spare to buy an insulin pump, plus at least a couple of $100 a month for the supplies, then you might have to take insulin shots. And so if you don't have an insulin pump, you can take insulin shots via a vial and a syringe, or sometimes you can take insulin shots via, this is called a pen, an insulin pen and a pen needle. So depending on the type of insulin you need, you could take any combination of these types of injections. So when you take an insulin shot of one type of insulin, this particular type of insulin is short-acting insulin. This bottle is about $260 a bottle. Most people who take only short-acting insulin via insulin pump require at least 2 bottles per month. Many require more, 3, 4, or 5 bottles per month. So let's say, I'm just kind of trying to describe what it's like here to have diabetes, which is, as you know, a pre-existing condition. So let's say I'm going to eat an apple. Okay, so I've got 2 apples here. There's like well, maybe I won't eat this one because it's got a little blemish, but oh, you want an apple? Give me just a second. Okay, so one of these apples is bigger than the other. So an apple might have anywhere from 15 to 17 to even up to like 30 to 35 grams of carbohydrates in it. It just depends on how sweet the apple is, and it depends on how big the apple is. And so, George, here, I'm going to give George this big apple, because otherwise he's just going to... George, I'm not even doing diabetes. I'm just talking about it. Here, I'm going to get it started for you. So, there you go. Okay. So let's say I eat this little apple. And let's say that I'm absolutely certain, and this is never a certainty, but let's just say I'm absolutely certain that this little apple is exactly 17 grams of carbohydrate. So what I have to do is take this much insulin for that apple. That's for the little apple. Okay. Now let's say instead I decide to eat the big apple. Maybe this big apple has like 25 grams of carbohydrates in it, which it probably does. Shenanigans the cat. Go over there. I would have to take, instead of this much insulin, I would have to take this much insulin. So you can kind of see how easy it is to screw up. And this is kind of why people with diabetes have such a hard time managing their blood sugar. It's really... What do you mean no? Are you telling the kitty no, or are you telling me no? Here, have your graham cracker. You're not allowed to play with needles. Over here. Okay. So anyway, what was I saying? Yes, so you can see how difficult it might be for somebody with diabetes to keep their blood sugar in perfect range all the time. Because if I took this amount of insulin and ate the little apple, I would, in maybe just, I don't know, about an hour or so, start feeling pretty bad. But in my case, you know, I would use the insulin pump. If you don't use the insulin pump, or if your insulin pump breaks, then you can just actually take an injection. I'll show you how that's done. So like, you can see my arm here. I'll talk about that thing in a second. But like, you just kind of pinch up and you poke yourself, and then you give yourself some insulin and you count. And that's annoying. Like, I don't like doing that, because if I didn't have my pump, I would have to do this, I don't even know how many times a day, probably between 6 and 10. But then also, if you don't have an insulin pump, you also have to take long-acting insulin. So in addition to like all these little microbursts of short-acting insulin that you have to take like every time you eat, or every time you have like a blood sugar that's too high because you screwed up some, you know, apple carbohydrate calculation or whatever. And sometimes you have to take long-acting insulin. And so here's how that's done. This is pretty cool. You just take this needle, pen needle. No, Georgie. Dude, look what you have. Oh, you eat an apple. Okay, here. Why don't you play with that too? That's a good time. Okay, Mommy's trying to do an educational video and it's not working very well. Okay, so we take off, it's a little needle, see? I mean, it's really hard to see. It's not that bad. So you first have to prime it. This is another problem. You have to prime a pen needle every single time you take insulin, which actually wastes a little bit of the insulin every time you take insulin. And so the insurance companies don't actually account for the wasted insulin when they are giving you a limit, or when they're setting limits on the insulin that you're allowed to have. Do you want this one instead? No, okay. All right, buddy. All right, so if you need to take insulin that is long-acting through a pen, you just kind of prime it. I actually am going to take a little bit, even though I shouldn't be doing this because I have a pump that's working right now. So, but if you want to take insulin that's long-acting, you can just like, you know, show off my guts. Yeah, I know. And so you can expect to do this type of insulin injection maybe twice a day, or sometimes even once a day, depending. I know you want your daddy. You kind of smell, dude. Probably gonna have to change your diaper. So that's how you take insulin. So you can either take insulin through an insulin pump, like push some buttons, or you can take insulin via a pen, or you can take insulin via a needle. And what you also have to do, no one likes doing this, is check your blood sugar. So if you have a meter, and if you are lucky enough to have your insurance company pay for your strips, which cost about $1 a piece, and you need to test about 6 times a day when you're diabetic, you basically just load the strip into the meter, and then you, go play with somebody else. Okay, good. You poke your finger. Some people call this like milking your finger, but you squeeze it a little bit so you get some. Where's the blood? How can I show this? Oh, there, now you can see it. So you get some blood on your finger, and then you put it into the strip, and then this little thing tells you what your blood sugar is. So it is 101. And so guess what happens? So this is really cool. This particular meter integrates with my insulin pump. So look what just happened. You can't really see that, can you? Well, my insulin pump has registered the fact that my blood sugar is 101. So I was really ticked off today because the pharmacy called and said that my insurance company is no longer covering this particular brand of test strip. So I'm going to have to get a new meter and some new test strips, and then the meter and test strips that I get will not interact with my insulin pump. So you can see kind of where at least some of the problems exist in terms of coverage for people with diabetes, especially due to all of this technology that exists. Now, I have another awesome piece of technology too. It is called, I think you saw it a second ago, it's called a Dexcom. So I have a little piece of metal under my skin, and that piece of metal is measuring the amount, I think it's measuring the amount of glucose in my interstitial fluid or something. Basically, this big old thing that's stuck to my arm is checking my blood sugar. I have to rotate this every like 7 days, and so it's really nice because like every 7 days I can rip the metal filament out of my skin and just stick it in some other place, and then I'm good to go for this super cool tool that works with my iPhone. Alright, so as you can see, my iPhone has this little report about how my blood sugar has been. I had pumpkin bread earlier, so that was really bad. But anyway, since earlier this morning, my blood sugar's been really good. So this particular tool is great for trending. So I can take this to my doctor, and my doctor can be like, you know, your blood sugar's been really high in the evenings. You know, what's going on? Are you taking the right amount of insulin? And I'll be like, well, yeah, I am taking the right amount of insulin, but I've been eating pumpkin bread. Or I could say, no, I'm not taking the right amount of insulin. I need your help. So as a diagnostic tool, this device, which is called a Dexcom, also known as a continuous glucose monitoring system, is really amazing. And I believe and know that having access to all of this technology and all of these medications has prevented hospitalizations for me since 1997. Before 97, I was on shots, and I wasn't able to access the right kind of insulin that I needed a lot of the time. I had gone without insurance for more than 63 days. This was like back in the day when, you know, they punished people with pre-existing conditions for going too long without insurance, and then I couldn't get my insulin covered, and I ended up in the hospital. Look, this stuff is expensive, but you know what is more expensive? Almost dying and getting stuck in the hospital. And that happened to me quite a few times. And so, where am I going with this? I don't want to complain about being diabetic. I actually feel like I should rejoice because I am so fortunate to have health insurance that is reasonable, that mostly, at least now, finally, covers all of the stuff that I need to be healthy. And I am healthy, and I'm able to exercise, and I'm able to take care of my kids and do all sorts of other things. It is still a fight. So even though I have all of this kick-ass stuff, I have to constantly fight and manipulate and play tricks in order to get it. This Dexcom thing, you know what? If my blood sugars are really bad, they won't let me have it. If I get my blood sugars good enough, if my blood sugars are too good, they won't let me have it. I mean, this stuff is just absolutely insane. So I am happy to have access to all of the things that I need in order to stay alive. And I think anyone with a pre-existing condition who has good health insurance and who has access to all of the things they need to stay alive is probably pretty thankful. It sucks. Having a condition sucks. It makes your life a hell of a lot harder than it ever had to be. But ultimately, staying alive is something that I'm really, really, really thankful for. What I am really sick of is the fight. Excuse me. Every time I need something to improve my health, even with the amazing insurance I have, I have to fight. I have to get on the phone and I have to scream and cry and I have to write appeals letters and that's how I got all this stuff. I had to fight. My problem is not that diabetes makes my life harder than it ever had to be. My problem is that my healthcare system makes my pre-existing condition way harder than it ever had to be. I don't know the answer to the problem. Thank you, George. What I do know is that I'm one of the really fortunate ones, and that there's so many people out there who are getting stuck in the hospital and actually dying. People with diabetes are actually dying because they can't get access to the drugs they need to save their life. And that's a problem. Please solve this problem.